shit.
And Jake Paul.
Wait a minute, Jake Paul was a promoter?
Yeah, without Jake Paul, that fight doesn't happen. He's
a full-on promoter now?
Yeah, absolutely.
The kid's got to hustle. You got to give it to him. The kid's got hustle.
He is a successful hustler. I don't even know. I think he might be. He's got hustle. Or he's not a hustler. This guy is a legitimate businessman.
Yeah, legitimate businessman. But
things.
He makes so much money doing other shit that the fact that he wants to do that as well and promote fights as well, I'm impressed.
He put her on his undercard. She got a lot of visibility there. People in boxing, of course, were already familiar with her, but it gave her much bigger notoriety by being on his cards. And then he and Eddie Hearn put this fight together. Again, I can't stress it enough, a an actual Madison Square Garden, sold-out main arena fight.
That's incredible. Good for him.
That was value for dollar, like paid
Sunglasses.
off. Yeah, he's doing the thing. He's doing the thing.
I like it, man.
I don't think this fight happens without him.
You know, the conversation he had with Eddie Hearn, where he said, I will knock out any one of your guys that has under 10 fights.
Right.
He goes, whoever you want to have, bring me any guy that you have that's under 10 fights. You could see Eddie Hearn like, shit. He was kind of stuck there.
You think?
Yep, because those guys under 10 fights, like, what if Jake Paul knocks one of them out? Like, what if you get a guy that, like, hasn't been tested and maybe has some promise and maybe gets wrapped up in the hype and maybe gets a little nervous and this is his first chance at a big show. And Jake Paul can crack.
Yeah.
100%. That knockout of Tyron Woodley is legit as fuck. He can crack.
But Eddie's point in that interview, and I think the point that just about every boxing aficionado would say is that Tyron Woodley is not a boxer.
Yep. And nor was Ben Askren, who he knocked out as well.
Right.
We would have gotten some answers if Tyson Fury didn't get injured, or excuse me, if
Tommy
Fury didn't get injured leading up to that fight, because he was the initial opponent. So if he fought him, we would have got some real answers. And that would be an interesting fight. But
agreed. And to your point, I saw people in boxing, when that fight seemed to actually was going to happen, start hedging their bets. Well, Fury isn't this, Tommy isn't that. I don't buy any of that. I think Tommy is absolutely a legitimate boxing opponent for Jake Paul.
Entertain this perspective. If Jake Paul wasn't Jake Paul, if he wasn't this YouTube guy, he was just a boxer, and you see a boxer knock out the former UFC welterweight champion, not just the former, but one of the best ever, knock him out with one punch like that, you'd be like, oh, man, have you seen this Jake Paul dude coming up? He's fucking for real. Because nothing about watching him fight, to me, screams like he's in over his head. Nothing. He looks like a real boxer. He looks like a real boxer. He doesn't look like a guy who's attempting boxing. That's the difference. The feints, the foot movement, the way he lands shots. He fights like a boxer. He doesn't fight like a guy who's trying to box in a celebrity boxing match. He fights like a boxer.
No, because
if he wasn't that guy, I'm saying if he wasn't that big YouTube star, and you just saw him as a boxing contender, you'd be like, that dude's got dynamite in his hands.
Okay, so there's 2 points to be made here. First of all, if a guy in his pro debut and the first 5 fights of his career are knocking out people whose names we know, you're absolutely right. That person is going to get a huge amount of attention, and everybody's going to be like, wow, who the fuck is this guy? But also, if a guy who is on the track to be somebody, who has like, potential from the Olympics, or he's got a great amateur record, we're going to turn this guy into somebody. In their first fights, they're fighting guys who are like 5 and 27. They are fighting other debut opponents who don't have a great trajectory in front of them. They're fighting tomato cans, bums, just completely not competitive opponents.
Just to get experience.
And that's fine, right? Yeah. So when we expect a Jake Paul to be fighting like higher level competition, it's not because he has under 10 fights. It's because he talks a lot of shit.
Yeah, but that's also why we're talking about him.
And that's exactly true. But I think on both sides of the equation, we've got to admit that a young fighter under 5 fights isn't fighting great competition. So if you're calling Jake Paul a legitimate boxer and then you're expecting him to do what legitimate boxers do, I'm not sure he's not doing that, and probably more.
That's what I'm saying about the knockout of Tyron Woodley, because it was just a regular boxer who's just coming up. And what does he have, 6 fights?
Yes, I don't know, something like this. What do you mean?
Five
What does
fights.
Jake Paul have?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
something like that, right?
No, I think
Jamie
that
said
was
five.
his sixth,
I
and
was
then
looking at a post he had where he said 6-0
Yeah,
coming soon. a couple
6-0.
weeks ago.
So okay, so he's got 5 fights. Now anybody who had just 5 fights, who's
Right.
like doing small cards, and then knocks out Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley says, "I'm going to try boxing," and some guy starches him with 1 punch and talks mad shit. You're like, "Wow, that guy's hot."
right. But the fighter doesn't a 5-0 fighter who's knocked out 5 guys isn't saying I'm ready for Canelo. Like no guy.
But you do if you're crazy and you just talk a lot of shit. It's not like Canelo's like waiting to fight him. Canelo's got a lot of things he's